Dr. Biodo Adedipe. Thank you very much, Dr. Adedipe, for joining us. Well, I'm so sorry you had to pass through that traffic we experience here all the time. Anyway, in your opinion, what are the business realities and trends of the financial and banking sector?
Well, thank you for having me here. I think the major issue where we start from is to recognize where banks stand in the contemporary modern economy. Now, the role they play, there are two fundamental roles, apart from other things banks do. One is what we call intermediation, which means they take deposits, and of course, they also grant loans. So for the modern economy to thrive, banks must consistently provide loans and all forms of credit to support the economy. That's on the one side. Now, it means then that if banks be able to do that, they must be able to sustain the confidence and trust of their customers. Now, the second thing they do, which is facilitating payments, also very important, because if you look at the contemporary modern economy, there is more specialization. So that means people do things, they produce things, offer services, and also earn money. But they have to make payments to those that have rendered such services to them. So now, for banks, therefore, that's why, in terms of regulation, banks are seen as significant public entities. So which means they are very central. So, but unfortunately, in a situation like this, banks are hit on both sides of what we describe as the demand and supply shocks that are caused by this pandemic, which means those that produce are unable to sell, those that want to buy are unable to access what they want to buy. Once that happens, the third major plank of economic activities, which is where banks are central, is exchange. That collapses immediately. So that means it puts banks in a challenge of, one, collecting loans they had granted on the one hand, and then on the other hand, people won't bring fresh deposits. And simply because what they have now, they are falling back on their surpluses and savings. So instead of bringing fresh deposits, banks don't get, and money, of course, is raw material in banking. Anyway.
All right, Dr. Adedipe, how do you envisage these realities and trends will actually impact the bottom line?
A very good question. Now, where I start from is the fact that loans that banks gave out, there are a number of those loans they won't be able to collect now because those who took those loans don't have the capacity to meet the maturing obligations to those banks. So there's an expectation that non-performing loans will likely grow. And once that happens, it means banks will have to start making provisions according to the banking regulations and expectations. Once they do that also, it immediately impacts the bottom line. So number one is that you are not earning fresh income the way you projected when the year started. Secondly is that even the little you earn, for those who are still in business anyway, you find that you have to put, it's like somebody prepared food and they told you, because of the problem outside there, you can't eat the food, go and put it in the freezer. That's what provisions represent for banks.
All right, Dr. Okay. Just hold your thoughts there. We'll come back to this conversation. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue with this conversation. Just stay with us. Welcome back. Well, we're talking about how the financial sector actually can navigate the human and business impact of COVID-19, and I still have here with me Dr. Biodo Adedipe. Dr. Adedipe, you were talking about the bottom line of these banks.
Yes, the one thing is that the volume of transactions will drop significantly on the one hand, and then pressure also comes in terms of pricing. Just like the central bank has given the banks forbearance to restructure loans that they have difficulty collecting. But what this means strategically is that if you're unable to collect the loans you have given, that also shrinks the space you have for creating new loans that ordinarily should bring fresh income to the bank. There's the other side of fees and commissions. So all the transactions that normally should bring fees and commissions also, a lot of them will again disappear in a period like this. So if you look at the entire spectrum of revenue for banks, banks will take a hit in every area. So there'll be significant revenue reduction. So no bank, I think, can escape that. That's the reality. And it's not just in Nigeria, it's a global phenomenon.
All right, we're talking about, we keep talking about challenges.
That's correct.
Now, what are the opportunities of this pandemic for the sector operators?
Well, essentially, and this is something I've been talking about for quite a while, that banks need to revisit their business models and recognize that consumer behavior has changed. And also, all these issues about social distancing and the rest of it is making most businesses migrate to the internet platform. So in which case, every bank should see this as an opportunity to expand their foothold and footprint in the digital space. So it then means banks should be looking at this as an opportunity to build their digital platforms, strengthen that, and of course, look at the other side of cybersecurity. Because as it were, if you have to do more business on that platform, more of your customers have to migrate there, and you probably will also have to become like, you think like a consultant. In which case, you are not just a regular banker, you now have to become like a consultant to your customers. So these are the things that will create new business opportunities. And of course, banks must ensure they put their names on the faces of their customers. This is a time to engage with them one by one, know what they are going through, and offer them advices on how to navigate the challenges.
Now, when the easing of the lockdown was initially announced, there was this fear that a lot of people were going to lose their jobs, particularly when this situation has really opened a lot of people's eyes that you can actually do a lot with the internet and all of that. And of course, some banks were even to be sacking their staffs before the central bank waded in to say, no, don't sack any staff. But do you see job losses eventually happening in this sector, or do you see creation of jobs?
Okay, now I will situate it in two contexts. The first context is to look at the history of humanity. How man migrated from Stone Age to the agrarian age to the industrial age, and then we talked about the, knowledge age and then information. So now what is happening is that as we move from one age to another, some skills will become irrelevant and some new skills will become desirable. What it means then is that for anybody who wants to retain his or her job in the environment we are seeing as a post-COVID-19, you need to have skills that will make you employable and relevant. So that on the one side means that globally, in any case, the projection globally is that about 200 million jobs will be lost as a result of COVID-19. That's the estimate by the International Labour Organization. So that's the global picture, okay? But the reality is that the banking industry is not, let me say it this way, they are not excluded from what is happening across all sectors. Okay, the reality of business is that when income is not coming the way you projected, you have to also look at the cost side. And of course, on the cost side for banks, they are looking at about 5 different items. First is you are looking at your personnel expenses, you are looking at your business expenses, premises expenses, then you have maintenance, okay? And then, of course, you talk about provisions, which has 2 legs for banks. The leg that applies to all businesses, which is amortization of your assets. Then the one that is peculiar to banks that I mentioned earlier, that is provision for loan losses, okay? So when you look at all those cost elements in your, income statement, it means you have to ask yourself, what must we do with respect to personnel expenses, for example? Now, there are 2 matrices, as we say it, that throw up your personnel expenses, your money metrics and then your remuneration metrics. So whether you like it or not, sentiment apart, you have to look at either the number of people you have, which means it's a time to look at that number and realistically. Then the other side is to look at remuneration, what you pay them. So you play with those 2. Now, I'm talking as a consultant, all right? You then go to business expenses and look at that also. What are those elements in your business expenses that you can do without? Now, if the situation we are in now, you have more people working from home, and that's the reality happening to every business around the world. You've discovered now that those who thought must report at work every day can actually deliver from home. So in which case, in redesigning their business models, those are areas banks will have to now look at in terms of how to become more cost efficient. That is the way we put it. They need to be efficient operationally, and they need to be efficient cost-wise. So it's not just about, we want to reduce number of staff just for the sake of it. It comes out of proper dimensioning of the numbers.
So what quality of human assets should or can the banks retain or acquire?
Excellent. Now, I will put it in this way. If I were to analyze this for an institution, I would say that there are usually 3 categories of staff. There are those who refer to as your professional staff. There are those who refer to as support staff that do provide support for the professional staff, okay? And then you have the outsourced staff. Now, those are 3 categories. So the question to ask yourself is, the staff that are outsourced, that's where you start from. Now, do we really need those outsourced staff now when they cannot work from home, and many of our bank branches are still closed anyway until we are able to restructure them to fall in line with social distancing and other post-COVID-19 reopening guidelines issued by the NCDC and the government. So that is on the one side. Then you now look at the other side of it, come to think of it, even the support and professional staff. Professional staff, you can redesign their jobs. That's a major thing every company around the world should be doing. I call it job redesign. So if you redesign jobs, it means the focus will be on the deliverables. So what do we expect each of them to deliver? If I can work from home and still deliver what is expected of me, then it means my employer doesn't need to create a space for me to sit in the office because I don't need that space. So that is part of the job redesign. Now, if it then means the nature of my job, I can't work from home, and yet I cannot be in the office, it means we have to redesign that job in such a way that that particular individual can still do something that contributes to value. In fact, there's a concept in business. We call it contribution. Contribution means what is every staff contributing to the bottom line? You're either contributing in terms of bringing income, or you are contributing in terms of reducing cost. If any staff of any organization is not connected to any of those two aspects of the business, the institution or organization has no business keeping that person on the payroll. So that's why I thought about job redesign. So if I can reskill you or retrain you to be fit for the post-COVID-19 business model, then I must face the reality of business and say, look, I have to let go of this person. But I also balance that with the fact that if things eventually return to normal, I will need these particular skills. So the challenge facing the banks, I would say generally now, is how to strike that balance of recognizing those that are contributing to the bottom line on the one hand, and recognizing that there are some skills that we may still need in future. But certainly, sentiments apart. If we see what has happened in aviation globally, happened in tourism, in hospitality, in logistics, and the rest of them, no industry is, I would say, is immune to what is happening.
All right, Dr. Adedipe. Well, just before I let you go, a quick one. What's your outlook for the banking sector?
Well, I will go from this perspective that 2020 is a year to focus on survival, which means the strategies that banks should be coming up with for this particular year should be about survival. No doubt anything like budget and prognosis that we had at the beginning of the year has disappeared. Nobody anywhere in the world, and we track what is happening globally, has given an indication that they expected this sort of pandemic to happen. Yeah. So it was not in the plan of any organization around the world. So what that then means is that the budget they had at the beginning of the year has gone out of the window, just like our own federal government has done. Okay? So they have to look at that afresh. So it's about survival. And when you get to survival, you don't talk about niceties. You don't talk about sentiments. You face the reality of what needs to be done for us to survive. So if the banks will therefore grow, and that's the second leg of strategy. Strategy first is survive. The second is to grow. The third one is to now increase profit. So they can only talk about growing in 2021 and begin to talk about generating profit thereafter. So for this year, my sentiment for banks is that it is all about survival.
Okay, survival strategy.
Yes.
That's where we will leave this conversation for now. Thank you very much, Dr. Adedipe.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.